Hello, family. Welcome back to our Shine Discipleship campaign. This whole discipleship series has been about good works. And today we're going to continue that whole concept. And really, when we talk about good works, we've been talking about what we do for impoverished people, what we can do for hurting people, what we can do for different people, what we can do for incarcerated people. Today we're going to talk about shining light in a different aspect. Today we're going to talk about shining the light on lost people, 20 years ago, I was in an emergency room. I was having severe abdominal pain, and I mean, it was excruciating. I had left work, tried to go home, couldn't stay home, went to the emergency room. And, if you've ever had to go through an experience in an emergency room, minutes seem like hours and hours seem like days. And I was definitely there for some hours. And finally, they called my name and did a few things, and ultimately they gave me a shot of morphine. Okay, morphine. That was a blessing. Oh my goodness. That pain went away. I wasn't hurting. I was good. And if they would have given me the option to go home, I could have gone home. I was feeling fine. My issue of pain was resolved. Where's the customer service survey? Let me give you guys, 4 out of 5 stars. Well, I couldn't give them 5 out of 5. Listen, that emergency room receptionist, it just didn't happen there. Okay, but they would have sent me home thinking they had done their job. I would have felt like they did their job because my issue of pain was resolved. And I would have gone home and I would have died a very comfortable death. That's what would have happened. And the reason being because of my issue. The issue that I had that sent me to the emergency room was appendicitis. And so I would have been in a world of trouble had they have sent me home. I had a condition on the inside that needed care, just like the issues that was more apparent needed care, and that's true of people. Right? We can get focused on dealing with the physical needs of people and miss the spiritual need of people. There's a great passage where Jesus highlights the need and calls for his disciples to meet the need. And it's in Matthew's gospel, Matthew chapter 9. We're going to read verses 35 into the beginning of chapter 10, and then we're going to move a little further into chapter 10. And this is from the English Standard Version. It says, "And Jesus went through all the cities and villages, teaching in their synagogues and proclaiming the gospel of the kingdom and healing every disease and every affliction. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them because they were harassed and helpless like sheep without a shepherd. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore, pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers into his harvest." Then, chapter 10, verse 1, "And he called to him his 12 disciples, and he gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction," right? So he gave them authority to do the things that he was doing. But then, as we move down to verse 7, it says, "And proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. You receive without paying, give without pay." And so Jesus, when we started to read this passage in chapter 9, he is healing folks and he is proclaiming good news, right? He is proclaiming the gospel. And as we move through, after he's seen the crowds, what does he equip and command his disciples to do? To do the very same things that he was doing, to care for people the very same way. And so, listen, if we're going to be expressing compassion, if we're doing these good works, we need to do it just like Jesus did it. And how is it that Jesus did it? This is what I want us to see and focus on today. That caring like Christ involves performing good works and proclaiming good news, right? Good works and good news go together. Now, what in the world do I mean by good news? Here's what we mean by good news or the gospel. It is the life and work of Jesus to restore creation and to redeem humanity through faith. He lived a sinless life, but he also died on the cross for the sins of humanity in order to reconcile sinful human beings with a holy God. And ultimately, this redemption is not just going to be with humans, but there's going to be a new heaven and a new earth. He's going to restore everything that is broken. This is the good news. And it's important that we don't just have good works, that we also have good news. Many times churches have a proclivity of having one over the other. You'll have a really strong teaching church, but they're not so focused on the community. I don't know if you ever heard that phrase, so heavenly minded that they're no earthly good. And then you have the other end of the spectrum, right? Always doing community service, always out there trying to help people in the world, but the teaching really isn't there. Not really dealing with the eternal soul so much. Hey, if it happens, it happens. Well, listen, you need to have both, right? As a follower of Christ, that's what Christ had. He had both. In Luke chapter 4, Jesus talks about his purpose, his calling and coming, which is really a fulfillment of Isaiah's prophecy in Isaiah chapter 61. But here's where Luke records what Jesus said. He stood up in a synagogue and he read from Isaiah's Isaiah's prophecy about himself. He says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed," right? And so you see in that passage, and Jesus speaking of his person and purpose, both him addressing a spiritual need and a physical one, right? Of him proclaiming the good news, but also dealing with captives, right? We talked about incarcerated people, also talk recovering sight of blind people who are hurting, liberty of those who are oppressed. And so he's dealing with both physical and spiritual needs. And I want us to understand, if we just focus on the physical, what we do is just like what I mentioned earlier, right? We give them morphine and send them home. We just make a more comfortable death, right? Because that person doesn't have a relationship with Jesus Christ. They're not restored to relationship with a holy God. And so we want to do both. Jesus was moved with compassion when he saw the crowd, right? Matter of fact, I want us to remember that in this passage. Right there in verse 36, it says, when he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them. What was the deal about having compassion? They were just cute, right? They had big, pretty eyes. What was the compassion about? No, they weren't cute. They were hurting. It says that they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Jesus is seeing their spiritual condition. How did I get diagnosed with the appendicitis, right? Did they look at me and just have me do some stretching or whatever? No, no, no. They injected a dye in me and they ran a CT scan. And that dye highlighted the issue. They were able to see what was going on inside of me. And that's what Jesus could see with the people. It says harassed and helpless. The Greek word is much stronger and more violent than harassed and helpless. The Greek word is skulo, which means lacerated or flayed, like if you took a knife and peeled skin off. And then harass means to be thrown down. And so it's almost this imagery when you're talking about sheep that are cut and thrown down. It's like if a wolf came in and just shredded the flock. That's how he sees people apart from him. And it's written so that his followers would have the same sight, right? He's handing the CT scan of lost people to us so that we would have the same compassion. And when we have the same compassion, that we would be motivated as we have been equipped by him to express the same care, to deal with not just the physical need, but the spiritual need. That harassed and helpless sheep without a shepherd needs the gospel, needs the good news. And it's our calling and obligation to share that. We can't say that we care for people and just deal with the sandwich when they're hungry and miss the soul. You say, well, I don't know what to do. Let me tell you how to share the gospel. It's going to be real easy. Sometimes there are different methods and 4 spiritual laws and Roman road, but out of the 4 spiritual laws, you only remember 3 out of 4. And the Roman road, you can't remember all the verses, so you end up with a roadblock. How can you share the gospel and have it where you can always remember? It's going to be a real easy way. And that's to share your testimony. Okay. You ought to know your testimony. You ought to know where you were and how Jesus made a difference in your life. If you've never thought about it, real simple tool to try to think about your testimony. Okay. Three things. One, think about your spiritual need. What was your spiritual need? In the sense of maybe there was a time in your life when you were just really, felt lost, or you were desiring the wrong things. You were going after the wrong things to try to satisfy something that could never be satisfied. Whatever it is, there was a need, right? There was a hunger for something. Maybe there was a frustration of not feeling free to something. Maybe there was a loneliness you never could overcome, but there was something missing. And so that is the need. And then the next thing is Jesus, right? You had a encounter with Jesus. You came to a place where you made a commitment to Jesus. How did you make that commitment? How did you find out about Jesus? What did you do? And then the last thing is, what difference did he make in your life? Right? Was there a place of joy that you hadn't found? Was there a place of feeling like you belonged that you had never felt before? Did you feel like a load was lifted off your shoulders? Whatever that is, that's the change. Those three things are your testimony. And it's easy for you to remember. Nobody can refute your story. And so I want you to be in a habit. I want you to be ready to share your story. All right. Listen, I pray that you've been encouraged today, right? And I want you as a family, if you haven't practice your testimony, write it down. And if you don't have a testimony, listen, it's a good day to start one. You can put your trust in Jesus Christ right now, right where you are. And this can be the very beginning of the very best time of your life. Listen, I pray that you have been blessed by this series, but I don't want you to just be hearers of the words. I want you to do something. I want you to care for people, and I really want you to care for lost people. Listen, I want to thank you for being with us one more time. And listen, we'd love to hear your testimony. Send me an email at info@twolc. I want to thank you for taking this time out. Hope you have a wonderful day. And we'll do this again, Lord willing. Take care.